Hey everybody, welcome back to Diesel Creek. Today we are going to be getting back onto the 1964 CJ5 project here. If you haven't seen the previous videos on this Jeep, it's a really cool project. You should definitely go back and check this series out from the beginning. I rescued this Jeep from getting scrapped. It was in a barn. They were cleaning out an estate. I ended up picking this thing up for 500 bucks from the original owners. So I drug it out of the barn. It had a stuck engine. We got the engine freed up, turning over, and in the last video I was able to get the thing actually running and took it for a short little drive up my driveway and back here, but it wasn't very long before we started having some problems. So before I even got to the end of my driveway and back here to the shop, this poor little guy was overheating already, and I'm not so sure that it was overheating as much as it was overpressurizing. It's my belief that there is a bad head gasket, and that is letting compression from the engine into the cooling system, overpressurizing and overheating the cooling system. Now, why do I believe that? Well, a lot of people commented, oh, it could be a stuck thermostat, it could be a water pump, and you're not wrong. I'm definitely going to replace the thermostat. The water pump's like 140 bucks, so I'm a little hesitant to do that unless I think that it's actually bad, so we're going to determine that today. But I think the head gasket's bad because the engine was stuck. Well, why was the engine stuck? Well, on number 2 cylinder, all the way back in the very first video, I did a bore scope on number 2, and that was the cylinder that was holding us up, and it was all rusted inside there. Why was it rusted? Well, I think the head gasket's bad, and it let coolant down into the cylinder, which rusted the cylinder up and let it stick. I can't guarantee anything, but that's my belief. So for those of you that were saying, well, why don't you do a thermostat first? That's why. If this engine was really hard to put a head gasket on, I'd be a little more hesitant. I would maybe investigate a little further, but the head gasket was like 30 bucks, and it's going to take maybe a couple hours to put a head gasket on at the very most, and that's with me filming as well. So we're just going to go ahead and put a head gasket on it, and in the process we'll get to open up the engine and see what we're looking at here, if we got any burnt valves, if we got a scored cylinder, anything like that. It smoked like a freight train when I first got it started in the last video, but it actually cleared up really nicely by the time I started driving it around a little bit. It wasn't smoking at all when I backed it back in here. So I'm holding out hope that we got us a good mill under the hood there. Anyways, let's get into this thing. Alright, so we're ready to start stripping the top off this engine now. We gotta pull the carburetor back off. There's a bunch of hoses, plug wires, valve cover, rad hoses. It's gonna be a good time. I'm not gonna sit here and make you watch me actually unbolt every single little thing, so let's get going on a time lapse. You ready? Alright, well, if my calculations are correct, we are about to pull the head off of here. And thanks to whoever it was in the comment, I saw comments on the last video. They said, don't forget, there's one head bolt down underneath the carburetor. And I tell you what, if I wouldn't have seen that comment, there's no way that I would have seen that bolt. So, that's the last one I got to zip out of there, and then we can lift this head right off of here. Hopefully. Also, as I said earlier, a lot of people commented, could be the stuck thermostat, that's why it was overheating. There was no thermostat in there. Here's the housing, completely empty. They had already pulled the thermostat, and I believe they did that in an attempt to see why it was overheating, and then the engine probably stuck not long after that. That's probably when this thing got parked and just got left in that barn, because nobody wanted to sit there and seriously diagnose this thing. It also had 4 brand new spark plugs in it whenever I got it here. So yeah, I don't even have to replace those. They had never been run whenever I got this thing. I'm gonna pull these push rods out. I got a box over here with notches in it, so they're labeled and I won't change these out, but it shouldn't matter. All right, here we go. Double checking all these bolts are loose. Looks like we're good. Guys ready to see what's behind door number 1 here? All right. Yeah, upon quick first inspection here, the cylinders don't look too bad. Well, I'm spending some time here inspecting the block, and so you can clearly see that number 2 cylinder here, this is the one that was seized up. The top of the piston is pretty pitted up, but not in bad condition. I mean, it can run like this, no problem. Looking at the deck on the block here, I mean, I don't visibly see anything yet. I'm going to have to clean it off really good and make sure that I don't see anything. But this valve, you can see it's not running correctly. You know, these are the exhaust valves. This is the color they should be. Maybe that's a little lean even for them. This guy's not running quite right, and this one's definitely not running right. So, yeah. It's going to take some closer inspection. But there's a little teeny dot there I think you guys can see in the cylinder, right about there. And I'm thinking that might actually be a pinhole into the water jacket. And if that's the case, that's pretty much done for this block. If you want to do it correctly, what I will do if that's the case is put some sealer in that block, and hopefully it'll just patch that hole up for us. I have the head set up over here so I can clean it off and inspect it. I don't see any obvious places that the gasket has failed, but I'm going to have to pick it off of here and do some better inspecting. All right, so I've got a really fine piece of wire here, and I'm trying to shove it through what I can't tell if it's a hole or just a little blister basically in the side of the cylinder here. I can't seem to get the wire through it, so I think that it's not a through hole. It's just like a little pit maybe from the rust. So yeah, that's a good sign. So it's time to clean off the head and the deck here and make sure there's no other cracks that I can't see yet. Oh, this is going to come off not the best. Well, nothing jumps out at me immediately. Let's get this thing cleaned up better. Alright, so I got this head really cleaned off well last night, and it's actually already starting to flash rust just from sitting out here overnight. But the I've looked and looked and looked and looked some more, and I cannot see any cracks in this head. It looks perfect. I forgot to bring my straight edges here. I want to put a straight edge on this thing and make sure that it's true and not warped at all before we put it back on there. But it looks good. The only little issue that I found was it looks like somebody just slid this thing on something. There's a little scratch across here, here, and here, and they're all in the same direction, so that tells me this head was just sitting somewhere and somebody slid it and put some scratches in it. Definitely just scratches though, they're not cracks. Same can be said for the block here. I have looked and looked and looked some more. I can't see any sign of cracking at all. Like I showed you guys earlier, there's a little pit right there, but it doesn't appear to go anywhere. I tried passing a torch cleaning tip, the smallest one I could find. I tried putting it through that pit and it wouldn't go in. So I don't think that's actually a hole in the block or a pinhole through the cylinder. I think it's just a pit out of the metal. The valves even look pretty clean here. The seats don't look like they're all carboned over or anything. It looks like they make good closure. I think I'm pretty much just gonna send it. We're gonna put this thing back together and I think we're gonna be good. I think that gasket had to have failed somewhere. So I know there's going to be people crying in the comments that I didn't send the head out and get it checked, you know, at a machine shop for cracks and have them deck it and everything else. I mean, look at this thing. We're not going that kind of mileage here. This thing is not going to get restored. I really love the patina on it. The most I'm going to do to this Jeep is bang out the dents, and we're going to run it. I think this thing's in great condition, really. And, you know, if it comes to it, if we have to take the engine back apart, what did I waste? I wasted a couple hours of my time and $30 on a gasket. Not a big deal. So I think we're going to be fine, though, with just the gasket. All right, well, I put this thing out here in the sun and really get a better look at it. And I think I might have found where we were getting our water in at. So you can see, like this area here, it was open to the moisture that was down in the cylinder there, and that's why it's a little pitted up. It had rusted. But I think our water ingress was coming from right there, because this is a water jacket that would be full of water. And there's just a little bit of slight pitting there. Some slight pitting that transfers over all the way into the compression area. So I think that's where the gasket failed at. Head gasket. All right, all the holes are lined up, looking good. Coming back in with the head. Ooh, there's a good way to strain your back. It's not super heavy, but it's just an awkward position. Yeah, we've got a couple bolts lined up. We're good. I found that anytime I don't explicitly show me doing things like this, you guys all jump to the conclusions that I must not have done them. So here you go. I did it. I am not really running these things down at all. I'm just literally running the bolts in, and then we're going to go through a torque sequence. All right, so I'm doing the torque sequence here in 3 steps. Our target goal is 60 to 70 foot-pounds. So I started off with 30 foot-pounds, got them all cranked down nice and even. Now we're braking at 55, and then for the third round, we're gonna brake at 65. So that's right in the middle of the target goal, and that should bring the head down really nice and even and ensure a good seal. All right, here we go. Third and final round, 65 pounds. 65 foot-pounds. Here we go. There we go. That's all of them torqued down nice and even. Looks good. Let's reassemble this thing. I just installed our push rods here, ready to drop in our valve train. Come on. There we go. All right, torque spec on these calls for 30 to 36 foot-pounds. So I always shoot for the middle, so we're gonna torque these down to 33. These aren't nearly as critical as like head bolts or something, so I'm just gonna take them up gently and then click them down. There we go. Now I would go ahead and throw the valve cover back on at this point. However, I'm waiting on a valve cover gasket that won't be in for another day or two. So we're gonna have to just keep this thing clean, throw a couple rags over it tonight before I leave. And once that comes in, we can reassemble everything. All right, so with the head buttoned up on there, we're gonna go ahead and move over to the fuel system now. We're gonna start with the tank, but we also have the fuel pump down here on the side of the engine to worry about as well. So the tank in this vehicle is located underneath the driver's seat here. That's that guy right there. I'm gonna take a peek inside here first. I haven't really even took much of a look. Well, I don't know how well you guys can see it, but it doesn't look real great. I think I'm gonna start by just pulling this tank out of here, and we'll go from there. I like to keep this thing all original if possible, but I have looked online and there are remanufactured tanks for this pretty cheap. So I'm not gonna spend a whole ton of time or money on this thing. If it's not the best condition, we're just gonna replace it, save ourselves the headache. Well, with the remnants of this driver's seat out of the way, we should be able to get to the fuel tank. I don't know whether to send this thing to the scrapyard or to the upholstery shop. Maybe you guys should comment down below and tell me if you think it's worth saving the original seats. Ooh. Check out this score, boys. I just set that seat up and out of the way, and out of it fell this sweet old Barlow pocket knife. It is in rough shape, but we're gonna see about cleaning this thing up. I love little treats like that. Yeah, I can't even open it right now. Probably some evapor rust will take care of this thing. We'll check back on that at the end of the video and see what it looks like. With our attention back on the fuel tank here, it looks like there might be some other goodies we find in this process here. I spied a knob here already. What is this thing? It's a lighter? I don't know. It's threaded. Goes to something. This is a good congregation point for all the odds and ends that rolled underneath the seat though over the years, so you never know what you'll find down here. Look at this. Some old bolts. Never know what we'll find here. That's a Phillips screw holding on the wire for the sending unit here. What do you guys think the odds are that that's going to come off without snapping? Oh, look at that. Didn't even really put up much of a fight. It come right out. We got lucky there. If I am not mistaken, I think that means that our fuel tank's just about ready to come out. There should be just a fuel line somewhere. I haven't seen it yet though. The lighting isn't the best, but we're underneath the Jeep right now, trying to get this fuel line out of here without snapping anything off. Oh, oh, rest in the face. Hey, look at that, it's turning though. There we go. All right, this tank should just lift up out now. Ugh. Ugh. Oh, look, a wrench. Probably not a 10mm though. Just a stinking 3/8. What else we got encapsulated in here? Bunch of fence staples, pop tops, "20-year-old mouse poop," all the good stuff. I'll tell you what, look at that. The bottom of the tank looks remarkably solid still. I'm very impressed at that. Huh. All right, well, I sifted through all that crap that was trapped down behind the tank here, and wasn't much of a surprise since it's such a trap area, but we found a bunch more rot back here. Nothing severe, definitely savable, patchable, whatever you want to call it. It never fails. The best stuff always happens when the camera's not rolling. I put that tank up there to flip it upside down just to get a better visual, and all that rust poured out of it, and I think there's more. Look at it. Holy crap. Good Lord. This is like a magic trick. It just keeps coming. There we go. There's some more. That was pretty bad. Now, you wouldn't believe it, for all that rust that we saw come out of there, the tank actually looks really good. What probably happened was, over the years of the moisture lingered around in the fuel tank there and rusted the whole top surface of the tank, and then from bouncing around just now, all that fell down and came out. And I've blown it out with the air compressor several times. Not much really coming out at all now. It's pretty clean. The bottom, which is what we're most concerned with, is where the fuel's gonna ride. It's nice, it looks great. You know, once it's rinsed out a little bit, I don't think we're gonna have any issue with it at all. Also, if it does drop some more rust into the fuel, rust is heavier, the rust is gonna settle to the bottom, and the fuel pickup tube is slightly raised from the bottom of the tank so that we're not going to be getting right off the bottom. So this looks like some sort of a vacuum pump down here on the bottom of the fuel pump. Never seen anything quite like that. But that sediment bowl's awful nasty though. There we go. Oh yeah, there's some gunk up there. Alright, this guy right here is the reason we tore the fuel pump apart. It's in remarkably good shape, all things considered. But what happens with this thing is, this is the diaphragm. This is what actually sucks and draws the fuel from the tank and pushes it up to the carburetor. And it sits on top of here. Now, if this diaphragm has a crack in it, it'll allow fuel to pass through the diaphragm down into the body of the pump here, and it will drain out into the crankcase of the engine, thus putting all kind of gasoline into your oil, which is no bueno. Now, like I said, this one is in remarkably good shape, all things considered, but it does have some dry rotting and cracking going on there, so it's best just to replace it, and that way we don't have to concern ourselves with it for a long, long time. Well, new thermostat doesn't come with a gasket. They couldn't get me a gasket, supposedly, so had to make my own. Not a big deal. Right, with that, I got the top of the engine all buttoned up there, carburetor back on, plug wires all reconnected here. The only thing we have left to do now, before we can try to fire this thing back up, is I gotta get that fuel pump we removed from down there. We've got to get it back together. I was actually able to track down a rebuild kit for this old thing, believe it or not. Look at this guy. Fuel pump repair kit. This is the coolest part. Date of 11 of 71 on this thing. This thing's been sitting on a shelf since 1971. Hopefully the diaphragm that's in here isn't all dry rotted. Now the rubber's still really nice, actually. This is the lower half that I haven't actually disassembled yet. This is for the vacuum side down here. So this is actually a combination pump. This does fuel on this side, and this side it operates a vacuum pump, which for this vehicle would have operated the windshield wipers and I think a couple other little things for the heating system. So that's the vacuum diaphragm. It looks to be in good shape. Yeah, a bunch of springs and washers and whatnot. This is a very thorough rebuild kit by the looks of it here. Very thorough. Got a couple new springs. Last we have the fuel pump diaphragm, some screens, and some other cork gaskets and stuff. Looks like this is all going to work. Made in the USA. Love to see that. It's the only reason it says that is because this thing's from the 70s. There is a lot more little parts in this thing than I ever dreamed there would be. If you could even track down a rebuild kit for something like this these days, you're not going to get half of this stuff. You're going to get the diaphragms, and that's pretty much it. So this is really strange, but strange in a good way to me, that you get all this stuff. Alrighty, look at that. All back together. Should be ready to install. She's a beauty. As for the engine, everything is all back together. The last thing we have to do is reinstall that fuel tank after I get it rinsed out here. Connect the fuel line down there to the pump. And then we're going to throw the driver's seat back in this thing and hopefully fire it up and take it for a spin. Put some new coolant back in this thing. We're getting really close to firing this thing up and seeing if it's going to overheat again. Hopefully the answer is no. I'm pretty confident that that's going to be the case. Rather than wasting good gas to clean out a fuel tank here, I've got some diesel cut with a little bit of oil, and we're just using it for rinsing, so not going to really matter. It'll be just fine. All right, we're just gonna rinse and repeat, do that 4 or 5 times, and we should be good to go. Oh look, a live stink bug was in that tank. I hate stink bugs. All right, that one was actually just straight regular gas, just to pull out most of that diesel and oil. And the rest of it, I'm not worried about. As long as I don't see any big chunks of dirt in there, we're just gonna dilute it out with fresh gas. Still some visible gasoline vapors in there, but I think you guys can tell. She looks beautiful in there, actually. That tank looks like it cleaned up miraculously. I'm not really talking about the filler neck right here. There's still a little bit of rough scale on that, but not enough to really matter. But the actual tank itself down there where the fuel's gonna be, beautiful. Fuel tank going back in. Oh yeah. All right, we got the fuel tank all hooked up. Should be able to crank the engine over now, and if we rebuilt the fuel pump correctly, which fingers crossed we did, you should see this sediment bowl fill up with fuel there and push it up to the carburetor. Okay. Anything?
Yep. It's coming slowly. Bowl's full now.
All right.
Just waiting on it to come up in the carb.
Cool. All right, we're gonna see if this thing's gonna fire up now. Go on deck. Look at that, running like a dream. Let it run for a while and see if the thing overheats. Now we're pushing a little banana freeze up here, but I might have had it over full, or it might have a little bubble in it. All right, we let it run a while here. Got it good and hot. It did have one bubble in the system, so once we burped the bubble out, it sprayed antifreeze everywhere, of course, when it did that, but it all settled back down. We've topped it all back off after it burped, and it's looking good. I think we have it fixed. Time to take this thing for a ride. temp gauge is the only gauge that appears to be working. And after 15-20 minutes here running around the driveway, it hasn't overheated. It looks good. So we drove it around for 20 minutes or so here, and the temp never came up. The temperature's reading good, but under the hood here, showing quite a different story. There's antifreeze everywhere. I think we have a bad radiator, so looks like we're gonna have to hop online and buy a new radiator, because I'm not trying to fix that old thing. They're pretty cheap online. I was able to find them, so that's a bummer. Well, it's a disappointing ending again to a video about the old Jeep here, but I'm going to keep persevering here. We definitely have a laundry list of things we need to scratch off before we can put this thing back on the road. One of them being this seat. I think I might have asked in the last video, but does anybody have any suggestions on a good upholstery person that I could send this thing to? Or do any of you happen to be upholstery people that would be able to save this seat? Or is it not worth it and I should just find a better replacement seat for that? Let me know down in the comments. I'm not very knowledgeable on upholstery whatsoever. So the brakes, in the last video I mentioned that it was sort of like stepping on a plum. They have not improved with age. In the next video I'm hoping to tackle the brake system. I was hoping that to be the focus of the next video, but it looks like we're going to have to finish the cooling system. Changing the radiator doesn't look to be too difficult though. Just a few screws, a couple hoses, should slide right out, swap a new one in. Hopefully that wraps up the cooling system at that time, and we can be able to actually put this thing through the paces and not have any issues. The one bright spot in all of this today is that our fuel pump that we rebuilt seems to be holding up quite well, and the fuel system has given us zero trouble, knock on wood. The fuel tank is apparently sending fuel to the pump, which is shoving her up to the carburetor, and the thing is running great, just like it did last time. I will say that this time I noticed it's a little bit smokier than it was the last video, so we're just going to have to keep an eye on that and see what happens. If the thing turns into a mosquito trap, then we might have to send the engine out and get it bored out and redo the whole thing. I don't know if I want to go that far. I have a little Volkswagen diesel that I think would wedge right into this thing, so. Oh, unfortunately, that's another unsatisfactory ending for a video on the old Jeep, but we're going to keep pushing, and I know that we're going to have this thing on the road here very soon. Next time you guys see the Jeep, we are going to swap out the radiator. We're going to tackle the brake system, so we're actually going to be able to stop this beauty, and then that's going to be the only thing that's going to stop us from taking it down the road. If you guys like this video, hit that thumbs up button down below. It really helps out the channel, doesn't cost you guys a thing. If you want to help support the channel, head on over to dieselcreek.com. Pick yourself up some sweet swag over there. We got some new merchandise for fall coming in right now. We got pocket t-shirts, we got long sleeve t-shirts, we got hoodies, and we got beanie caps all available now over at the store. So if you're interested, head over there, check those out, pick one up. You'll be glad you did. That's all I got though. Until the next video, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.